black cab driver was allegedly beaten. A rumor spread through the Central Ward that he had been murdered. That was not true, but rumors have very strong legs in cities that have issues, such as Newark had in those days.
So they took him out of the cab, put him in the car. One of the policemen beat him up, took him to the station, and when they did that, they made a mistake because they had to drag him in front of all those people who had Hayes homes out on a hot July night. And so the people were incensed. They just, you can't do that. Probably because this was the last straw. I mean, the people had suffered so much under the police, under unscrupulous landlords. They had moved one too many times from landlords or from urban renewal, and all these other things that were happening in town around those political issues. The people were mad, and so they came to demand to see what was happening.
That meeting, or that rally, I guess is the right word, covered extensively by every television crew from Philadelphia and New York, which really, even more than the taxi driver event, triggered the rest of the trouble that day. With the woman who stepped out of the crowd with a long pole, poked in the windows of the precinct, and the policy had been to give the community rallies and that sort of thing as much room as possible, and that was had worked for so many years.
The hate was there. I think the hate was on both sides, the police and the community, and that was I think the breaking point was the arrest of John Smith, and then the rumor that he was killed. Folks were looking for a fight, and it was going to happen sooner or later. The tension was there. Then your opportunists took over from that point, and all hell broke loose.
As the president of Springfield Air Merchants, I spoke to Spina, who was the director of the police, and I told him I was a little concerned about what happened, considering what all the riots all over the country. What was his feelings? And he felt that there wouldn't be any problem that evening, but it didn't work out that way. I was standing in front of my store about dusk when these individuals came along, 2 individuals came along and picked up a large trash can and threw it through my window while I was standing outside. So that was that was my introduction to the riots. I was very intimidated and frightened, and as I've said many times before, I had just flown 35 bombing raids over Germany. I had been shot down, and this was more frightening. At least when you were flying, you knew what to expect. And this was just clear out of the blue that this happened.
Scholars who've studied the riots claim that the first day and a half was a certain kind of riot involving residents in the Central Ward who were involved in the looting of stores and maybe arson. In other words, misbehaving citizens in Newark. Things were such in those early hours of the riot that Governor Hughes brought in the National Guard and the state police to quell the violence of the first riot. When those troops and troopers were brought in, then we enter the so-called second riot, which had all the markings of a riot by law enforcement officers. And that is the riot that took the greatest human toll. That's when people started losing their lives, and that's when the riot became a national spectacle of violence and mayhem and sadness and destruction.
The mayor felt that it was important to call the governor, who'd been monitoring the situation, and to ask for state police help. The idea was that the state police would isolate Newark, as the Newark police were going to isolate Springfield Avenue. Nice idea. But when the governor rushed in with the state police, they pretty much assumed full control. Not pretty much. They assumed full control and let us know in no uncertain terms they were running a show. And he called the National Guard. And the decision was to, not to contain, but to crush the disturbance. This gave license to everybody, including the Newark police, and they went on to crush it in quite a tragic manner.
You know, we couldn't keep the peace at a January white sale. So if this was their plan, I was thinking there's got to be something else. I mean, and this is, I think, a very working class thing. When you get to the point of criticizing the government where you start to scare yourself, you then say, well, they must know what they're doing or they wouldn't be there. So my hope was that somewhere on some higher level, someone was better prepared or than I imagined or had seen any evidence that they were. So the second night was the issue. I got to the corner of Springfield and Hunterton. Police cars, state troopers, all these other cars would then pull up to that intersection, and as they'd get a call, the first one would go out, the next one would go out. This not only made it a bit of a target if there was going to be shooting, actually. And so in the end, there were tremendous amounts of ammunition fired from that intersection at nothing in particular. I mean, indiscriminate, incredibly, raking the roofs of these projects with machine gun fire.
Most people stayed in, and kids stayed in. Because even I talked to friends of mine and stuff, and they didn't go out. My cousins, they didn't. I think one or two may have snuck out. But you slept on the floor. You heard all the gunfire. The gunfire was merciful. And you watch in the background, you can see fires burning everywhere.
The funny thing about the military is you have one common interest, which is you don't like it. So you have jokes about it, you fool. You start to think you're part of a fraternity, a group, guys you know, guys you have something in common with, and then you get to a place like this and you see somebody ends up shooting at an 11-year-old kid and almost kills me. And when I go down and confront him, he says, "We were told to shoot looters." And I say, "It's an 11-year-old kid. He's shoplifter yesterday. Today it's a capital crime today? He had cigarettes." And his answer was, "Well, we were told to shoot looters," he kept saying. And I said, "Who told you?" Nobody told me. I've been with you most of the time. He's like, "Well, that's what I heard." I'm like, so we're now one step removed. I heard we're supposed to shoot looters. He's an 11-year-old kid. And eventually someone shot and killed an 11-year-old kid, a guardsman. You know, I mean, and he kept questioning me like, why couldn't I get it? And then I really did have doubts. You know, I started to think, gee, I didn't think I was that different. Why would I suddenly not shoot? You know, in the end, what do I care if he has the cigarettes, I guess? I don't know.
Around Wednesday or Thursday, it was very clear that the police were rioting and not the people. And the 26 people who were killed were all killed by policemen. So we had to tell that story. What happened? James Rutledge was shot 39 times, and he was in a bar. Bar is still there, just under different ownership. He was, he and another guy, this is the story that the witness told me. They went into a bar which had been previously looted over on Bergen Street in the South Ward. And because they thought they could get something still there, I guess. I don't know why you go into a bar that's already been looted, but they did. And while they were in there, the police must have seen them. So the state cops came in. The witness hid behind the broken down bar on top of all the glass. He hid behind all of that. But Rutledge, thinking that he was really just innocent, because he hadn't done anything, all he was doing was in there, he hadn't stolen anything, he stood up. And the police just took their time and executed him. They shot him 39 times.
In the end, when you look back over 40 years, you wonder the price that was paid was very heavy. And for a result that doesn't seem to mean much now.
people who were raised in this town have talked about the riot as the defining moment in their lives. So it's an interesting paradox. Newark is a different kind of city than it was in 1967, but the riot almost to some extent sets the standard by which the city measures its progress and measures its frustrations. And over 40 years, up until very recently, when Americans thought of Newark, they thought of the riot.